Welcome everybody to the July Focus Friday. Today we're focusing on the North Carolina Attorney General's office with Attorney General Josh Stein. I'm Bill Russell, President of Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce. The Lake Norman Chamber, right at 900 members, serves the Cornelius, Davidson, Huntersville, and Greater Lake Norman region. We have with us today Jeff Tarte. He is our Public Policy Chair. Jeff, would you introduce Josh?
Sure, be happy to. And then we're going to give Josh the floor for a little bit. As background, we'll give our Attorney General a little bit of opportunity to share some of the things that are going on in the office, and then we'll shift into kind of a Q&A period. Josh Stein is, as most of you know, I believe our 50th, maybe, Attorney General in the state of North Carolina. Josh and I served together in the Senate for a number of years, literally sat next to each other in a number of committees. We were always cutting up and yapping, probably not like we were supposed to behave, but Josh has got an amazing background, numerous awards in the Senate, majority leader, well respected by both sides of the aisle. Josh and I are actually, in full disclosure, personal friends as well. I have a great deal of respect. One of the most intelligent and well-educated people we have in the General Assembly and serving in a statewide office. He has a Dartmouth undergraduate degree. He's got a master's in public administration from Harvard and also a Harvard Law degree. A brilliant mind, a great friend, a person who anyone in the state, you have an issue and a problem that's germane to the Attorney General's office, this is the man to call. Josh, we are blessed to have you serving us in this seat in the state. And again, it's nice to have a friend sitting in that seat. So with that, we really, truly appreciate you taking the time to join us today here in the Lake Norman region. This will show up around the state because it'll be online. And at this point, I'd love to just turn the floor over to you and let you give us a little update on what's going on in the state from the Attorney General's perspective.
That sounds great, Jeff. Very much appreciate your kind words. Jeff and I really enjoyed working together. He and I actually co-chaired a group focused on higher education in North Carolina and supporting our university system. And Jeff always understood what were the key institutions, the key infrastructure that we needed to support in North Carolina. And it's great to see you, even if it's just virtual, Jeff. Thanks so much.
Indeed.
And pleasure to be with everybody this morning. Thanks for taking time out of your day to visit. I know everybody's busy, and so really appreciate this. This year is unlike any other in my lifetime. I expect in yours as well. We have a confluence of the deadliest health pandemic in our lifetimes, worst in 100 years, the worst unemployment that we've had in 85 years since the Great Depression, and a social reckoning on race that this nation has sorely needed. We clearly have a great deal of work to do as a country. And at the Department of Justice, our normal work not only continues, but we have even more to do in light of this current reality. And so I want to talk a little bit today, this morning, about what that looks like at the Department of Justice. What are we working on? I've been on the job as Attorney General now 3.5 years, and I want to tell you all that I love the job. It's an incredible way to serve the people of the state because we get to protect them in many different ways. On the criminal justice front, we protect people in a host of ways. We prosecute certain cases when we get referrals from local DAs. We handle every criminal appeal in the state. I run the North Carolina Justice Academy, which trains law enforcement. We analyze crime scene evidence at the state crime lab, and we participate in important criminal justice debates. And none are more important than ensuring that our criminal justice system is fair and treats everyone equitably. The protests against racism that we've been seeing on our televisions, hearing about, participating in, are closely tied to many of these issues I've just mentioned. When you think about the inequities that African Americans experience in our country, whether it's in the economy, the healthcare system, our schools, or the criminal justice system, they're pervasive and they're wrong. I am proud that Governor Roy Cooper created a task force for racial equity and criminal justice, and he has asked that I, along with Associate North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Anita Earls, co-chair this effort. We had our first meeting last Friday, and we'll be meeting regularly over the next several months. And he was very clear when he talked to me about this idea at its early stage, is he doesn't want some commission to draft a blue ribbon report that just gets put on a shelf somewhere. He wanted an action-oriented task force that not only identified appropriate reforms for North Carolina, but worked for their implementation. It's about bringing change to our system. And the broad issues are recruiting, training, accountability of law enforcement, but it's not limited to just policing. It's also looking at court issues, pretrial release, the use of fines and fees. It is all about building genuine trust between law enforcement and the people they are to serve and protect. My ambition is, it's a big one. It's that our criminal justice system should more closely approximate the ideal of the words that are chiseled on the front of the United States Supreme Court building. And those are equal justice under law. That's what it must be. Another criminal justice issue I like to talk about that's been a big priority for my office is eliminating the backlog of untested sexual assault kits in North Carolina. We did a count in 2017 and came to the absolutely distressing and disheartening realization that there were about 15,000 untested sexual assault kits sitting on the shelves of local law enforcement offices all across North Carolina. Each of those 15,000 kits came from a person, an individual who had experienced a terrible traumatic violation and then willingly submitted to hours of an invasive examination to deliver evidence to the criminal justice system, and that system failed them. Absolutely inexcusable. So we have worked up a plan to eliminate the backlog once and for all and ensure that it never develops in North Carolina again. I raised $4 million in grant funds, went to the legislature, and we got passed a bill called the Survivor Act to give us $6 million so we can outsource all these kits. We developed and implemented a tracking system. You know, when you order a package on Amazon, you can track where that package is through UPS. When you order a pizza, you can know where that pizza is as it makes its way to your home. We had no way of knowing where the sexual assault kit was in the criminal justice process after it had been submitted. That is no longer the case. We have a barcode tracking system for each kit, which is available to the victim as well. So that person can know where it is. Why is it at the hospital? Why is it at the police department? Why is it at a lab? Why is this taking so long? That transparency will create accountability. Our message to the victims are that we care about you and we're going to do everything we can to deliver justice for you. To the public, we care about putting dangerous people behind bars so they can no longer hurt anyone in the community. And to the rapists, that no matter how long ago you committed your crime, we're going to come after you. We are making progress, as I mentioned. Here around the Lake Norman area, local police departments, Cornelius, Davidson, Huntersville, Mooresville, they are moving their kits forward in the process. More than half will have been shipped to the outside vendor who's doing the testing by the end of this month. 98 have been certified, 57 will be shipped. Catawba, Iredell, Lincoln County Sheriff's Office, they're working hard. They're reviewing their kits, prioritizing them for testing. About a quarter of their kits will have been shipped by the end of this month. 194 total, 47 being shipped. And I am not going to let up on this issue until there are no more left that are old and until I'm certain that it will not happen again. And when we test these kits, we solve old cases. There was a very powerful case in Salisbury. It was a rape murder that occurred 34 years ago, and they never solved it, but there was a lot of whispers that somehow the victim's sister was involved. And so she lived under a cloud of suspicion for 34 years. Well, we find the DNA was finally tested. The culprit was identified, deceased, but what was really important was that the cloud of suspicion was lifted from the sister, and that family can begin to heal and the community can move on. A third major criminal justice issue I want to talk about is the opioid epidemic. A major public health crisis. You know, sometimes I wonder if the media is able to handle more than one public health crisis at a time, because this story is sort of receded in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, and it's really tragic. I will say that it was the New York Times 2 days ago did a very long story, and the news is not good. We had done great work, actually bending the curve, having an actual reduction in the number of overdose deaths in 2019, 10% decline from 2018, after years and years and years of increases in opioid overdose deaths. But because of this pandemic, we've seen a real spike in overdose deaths again, which is truly heartbreaking. The opioid crisis is the deadliest drug epidemic in the history of the United States. And so I've been working on it from day one, 3.5 years. We have a comprehensive strategy: prevention, treatment and recovery, enforcement, and litigation. I champion laws like the STOP Act, the HOPE Act, the Synthetic Opioid Control Act, both about giving law enforcement the tools they need to hold drug traffickers and dealers accountable, and trying to reduce the number of people who get addicted in the first place through overprescription by the medical community. I want to thank Atrium, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Department of Health and Human Services. They were our key partners in a public education campaign we did last year called More Powerful NC. And that website is still live, morepowerfulnc.org. It is chock full of very useful information. If you have a loved one who's struggling, if you need help, if you just have questions about what's going on, and if you want to know what you can do, and truly, there is something that every single North Carolinian can do to help us turn the tide on this crisis. One thing is, go look in your medicine cabinet and see if you have any leftover pain pills there. And if you do, take them back to a drug drop box and put them out of your house. You would not leave a loaded gun in your medicine cabinet. You should not leave leftover prescription painkillers in your medicine cabinet, because they are a magnet to young people looking to mess around and to people with addiction. At every opportunity, I advocate that the state expand Medicaid. Expanding Medicaid would be the single most effective policy response the state could take to deal with this crisis. 500,000 people in North Carolina would qualify for health insurance. You can't get treatment if you can't pay for that treatment. It's pretty basic, and health insurance will help people get the health care that they need. I'm supporting local law enforcement that adopts strategy to try to move more people out of the criminal justice system, people with addiction, out of the criminal justice system and into the healthcare system. Because if they can get treated and well, we can dramatically reduce any criminal behavior. And I'm helping to lead the national multi-state investigation. This is a bipartisan effort of every attorney general in the country, Democratic and Republican, and we're cooperating, working together to hold the drug distributors and manufacturers accountable for their role in creating this crisis. And I'm hoping that in the coming weeks and months, we can make some major announcements. It's what I'm spending most of my time on. In addition to the criminal justice work we do, we protect consumers, we protect seniors, we protect student borrowers. Since I've been on the job, we've won more than $130 million in settlements and court awards on behalf of the people of North Carolina and the state. Almost all businesses play by the rules, but not all of them. There are some that'll break the rules, and they not only hurt consumers, but they hurt the companies that do things the right way, because they cut corners and cheat competition as well as consumers. One of my big priorities in consumer protection is fighting the scourge of robocalls. Robocalls are an incredible annoyance to you and me, but they are a source of fraud on our most vulnerable. We get so many complaints about robocalls, more than any other single issue. So I worked with my colleagues, again, every attorney general in the country, Democratic and Republican, and for about a year negotiated a series of anti-robocall principles with the major telephone companies, which we announced about a year ago. And about half of those 8 principles involved the phone companies deploying technology to better screen out these calls before they ever hit our phones. And then the other half have to do with enforcement and cooperating with law enforcement so that we can trace the source of these calls back to their point of origin and hold them accountable. Just last month, I brought an action against a robocaller in Texas who had made something like 75 million calls into North Carolina, pitching things like extended warranty offers. And so we want to go after the bad guys and put them out of business. Robocalls, unfortunately, have only increased in the era of coronavirus. Or the nature of the scams cover everything. I mean, basically what scammers do is they take a moment of kind of mass confusion, fear, and uncertainty and exploit it to try to prey on people to steal their money or personal information. And the coronavirus pandemic is a perfect opportunity for the criminals to do wrong. And so we need to do something about it. We're seeing the robocallers use, promise miracle cures, masks, tests for air ducts, contact tracing, economic impact payment, PPP, any part of this whole pandemic that's in the news, they take advantage of to try to steal. We're also getting many complaints about price gouging, more than 2,000, and we're looking into each one because the governor had declared a state of emergency. We brought an action against a towing company in the Charlotte area called A1 Towing. And this company was finding trucks that had permission to park where they were and putting a boot on the cab and the trailer, charging $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, and in one instance, $4,400 just to get the boot removed from the truck. So the truckers could get the medical supplies, food, water, cleaning supplies back in to the stream of commerce. Absolutely outrageous. We've gone to court, and while that action is underway, the courts have shut the business down from taking these actions. Look, scammers aren't the only reason why people are losing money under this pandemic. There is more economic hardship in a quicker period of time than any other time in our history. I mean, the rate at which people lost their jobs is without precedent. More than 1 million North Carolinians have filed for unemployment since the middle of March. And people are struggling to make ends meet. They're having trouble paying rent. They're having trouble putting food on their table. And I know that as business leaders in your community, you're seeing this, that you're seeing people who are really hurting. And I expect a number of you are really hurting. And so what we've tried to do is whatever we can to help people through this crisis. I partnered with the governor on an executive order that ensured that people wouldn't have their utilities disconnected. We suspended our debt collections on behalf of the state for any money that's owed to the state. We're not forgiving the debt to the state. People still owe North Carolina money. It's just we want them to have the breathing room to keep their head above water, to focus on providing for their families. And I want to thank Bank of America and State Employees Credit Union, the largest bank in the country and the 3rd largest credit union in the country. They joined with me in something I call the Carolina Relief Plan, whereby if you were one of their customers and you're in financial distress, they will give you 90-day forbearance on payments, a payment plan thereafter, and an assurance that they will neither foreclose on your home or repossess your car. And that's the kind of responsible corporate behavior we need to help people through this tough time until they can get back on their feet. I've also written to Congress urging them to reform the PPP program to make sure that in the next wave, it goes to small town businesses and not just these multinational, national corporations. I also urged Congress to increase support in the next round of stimulus funding for broadband access, because the broadband, this coronavirus has really accentuated the divide between rural and urban North Carolina, where there are communities that have very terrible quality broadband. And you can't telecommute, you can't telemedicine, you can't teleschool if you have terrible broadband. And we have to address this critical 21st century technology. And technology is one of the issues that Jeff and I worked together a lot on when we were together in the state Senate. Another thing that we do at the Department of Justice is ensure that tax cheats and people defrauding the Medicaid system are held accountable. We did something we called Operation Root Canal, in which we looked at a scam where dental practices were billing Medicaid for services not provided. And we've reached settlements with 10 different dental providers in which they've returned more than $6.3 million back to the Medicaid system. All in, we've had more than $100 million in monies returned to Medicaid in the 3.5 years I've been on the job. It's critical because when folks cheat the system, it forces you and I to pay more in taxes. That's not right. It's unacceptable, and we will not tolerate it. We also do environmental work at the Department of Justice, keeping the air that we breathe clean, the water that we drink clean, by holding polluters accountable. On behalf of the Department of Environmental Quality, reached settlements with Chemours, a company outside of Fayetteville, over discharging a chemical called Gen X into the Cape Fear River and the air, and with Duke Power over coal ash, something that you all know well in the Lake Norman area. They are going to excavate 80,000 tons of coal ash and line the pits, cap them, to keep our surface water and groundwater clean. When you turn on the tap at home to drink water, it should be safe and clean, and you should not have to worry about it. I've also been concerned and contesting federal efforts that roll back our government's most effective responses to the climate crisis, the Clean Power Plan and the Clean Car Standards. We have got to do everything we can to reduce carbon emissions for the future generations. So I want to thank y'all for your attention this morning. I've covered a broad array of issues. I also want to thank you for the roles that you play in your communities. You all are leaders. You have tremendous influences on how your communities are shaped, how your friends, family, neighbors, they view important issues of the day. And I thank you for that leadership. I'm excited to work with you all in the coming months and, God willing, years to keep the people of North Carolina safe and keep our state strong. And so thanks so much. And hopefully we can begin a question and answer session, and very much would like to hear folks' ideas, issues, and concerns.
Jeff, I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
Ask Josh. Josh, the chamber wasn't a victim because we knew right up it was a scam, but we were contacted months ago by an individual representing, they said that the utility company here in our community, we were late paying the bill. If we wanted to keep it, we needed to make payment. Well, when that was brought to my attention, I said, that's not our utility company. There's several that serve our area. I'm familiar with scams of that nature. I'm familiar with scams with jury duty. You missed your jury duty.
Yep.
As a Chamber of Commerce, when we hear that this scam is being perpetrated on a community, is there anything specifically we should tell our Chamber of Commerce members, our businesses?
Yeah, definitely. We actually have a scam alert system where this is not something that's going to overload your inbox. We probably issue one every 1 or 2 weeks, and it's all based on what's actually happening. What's the new scam that's happening? And so I would suggest that the chamber just sign up for that alert. It's easy to do on our website, ncdoj.gov, and any viewer can sign up for it. And if one resonates with you that you think might be relevant to your community, just cut and paste it and put it up there. a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll get the scam alerts and then put it on Facebook when they hear about them.
Well, Mr. Attorney General, it is mind-boggling the breadth of responsibility that your office has and the number of things that you're involved in. I just don't think most people understand that aspect of your role and responsibility.
I think most people don't understand any of the role and responsibility. They just know that I'm the government lawyer and involved in the criminal justice system, but it's a complicated office for sure.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, we could spend the rest of the day talking about things. There is no question. The help us and the listeners understand a little bit about the office itself, how it is structured, how many people, what kind of budget you have, resources at your direction, because you've touched on a number of things. And we'll come back for a little bit of time and touch in a few of those areas. We're not going to be able to get to all of them unless you're willing to stay through lunch.
Yeah, wish I could.
Okay.
We've got about 850 total employees. About half of those people are in the Attorney General's office. So I'm talking about the Department of Justice. I oversee the entire Department of Justice. So about half are in the Attorney General's office. And the majority of those people are lawyers, government lawyers. I would say the majority of the lawyers represent state agencies. And if you really think about it, the state of North Carolina is the biggest corporate entity in North Carolina. And when I say the state, I mean the actual corporate entity. The Department of Transportation, the Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, all these employees work for the state, and they are all represented by my office. So
that little $26 billion company.
Exactly right. And I mean, how many tens of thousands of employees? And so the state, being as big as it is, bumps into a lot of people and entities and organizations. So if they're putting in a new road and they have to condemn someone's property to put the road in, there are lawyers who negotiate that transaction. If there's a child abuse, a child neglect hearing, and they want to take away parental rights, there's a lawyer who's going to handle that. If somebody's cheating the Department of Revenue, we have another lawyer who will prosecute the tax. So we have a lot of lawyers representing state agencies, but then we also have a number of criminal lawyers who will either prosecute cases at the request of local DAs, or they'll handle the criminal appeals for when somebody has been convicted of a crime. All of those appeals are handled at our office. So that's the Attorney General's office. We also have a number of consumer protection attorneys who essentially just defend the people and go after companies that are cheating people. And I ran that division for 8 years before I was Attorney General, before I was in the state Senate. Then we have the state crime lab. There are 3. There's Raleigh, Greensboro, and Asheville. And then we have the North Carolina Justice Academy campuses. There are 2, one in the east, one in the west. And those 2 combined are about the other half of employees. And all in, it's about an $88 million budget. And one thing that's really great about working there is, and frankly, working in state government, if you've seen it, Jeff, from your time in the legislature, but a lot of people in private sector don't have much experience working with people in public service trying to serve them. Now, you may go to the DMV and experience your frustrations. So you have certain instances when you touch state government, but I can tell you that the quality of people who work in state government trying to help others is really, really impressive. And I love going to work with these talented, dedicated public servants.
Very good. Jump around a few things real quick. Let's go back to the rape kit issue, which was really problematic for a long time, and appreciate that it was a focus of your attention. Can you give us a sense of kind of how comfortable or how close we are to a functional system that addresses the testing of those kits in an expeditious manner so the criminal justice system can move forward? Because as Chief Justice Martin used to say, and I wonder if I assume we all kind of subscribe to, justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah. And yes, sadly, there is much justice delayed. I mean, we're talking about rapes that occurred 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, even more than 40 years ago. So, but justice delayed is better than justice ignored. And that's why I'm working so hard on this. We have actually set up the entire system so that everything is done. We've got the
So we're current.
system, we've got the money, we've got the contracts with the vendors, we've counted all the kits, we've certified the inventory, we've prioritized the kits for delivery. The only thing that is left to do is time. And I wish we could test all 15,000 like this. That's what the victims deserve. But the labs only have so much capacity because we're not the only state dealing with a backlog. So it is going to take us probably 2.5 years to just work on a monthly basis and test the kits and test the kits and test the kits. And I'll tell you, when I got the results back, the initial projection was it was going to be 4.5, 5 years to get it done. And I said, that's absolutely unacceptable. And I got on the phone with both CEOs of the labs, and they are actually creating new lab space and hiring new people just to increase the capacity to do our testing in North Carolina.
So we could be current in testing recent tests within 2 or 3 years.
We're current now. There are 2 categories of kits. There's pre-2018 and post-2018. Post-2018 is being handled by the state crime lab, our DNA analysts, in real time. And it takes 3-4 months to turn a kit around just by the normal amount of volume and the amount of time it takes to actually do the science. So if a rape occurs today, they will send it to the state crime lab. It will be in the system, and within a few months, we will turn it around and send it back to local law enforcement. For the old kits, it would absolutely overwhelm our lab. We don't have the capacity to test the current stream and all the old ones. And so we're sending those out to private labs, to vendors. If they get a hit, which they occasionally do, about 20% of the time, we're able to find an identifiable person to the DNA sample. It's amazing. We then do a confirmatory test for quality control. Then if that hit is confirmed, we send it to local law enforcement, and then they go commence their investigation and make an arrest if the person's around.
Well, I'll tell you this, Josh, just on a personal level, and then people may disagree with me, that's an amazing accomplishment on your watch. That in itself is unbelievably noteworthy. So truly appreciate it for everybody out there, because it's such an important issue that we dealt with so long. I'm going to deal with one that's not such a big deal, but it impacts you. We brought up is the robocalls and the scamming, because you're using the robo technique. People would sometimes say the political calls are scamming, but the question or the consumer, the average person out there, how do you know, are there any traits or attributes of a call that give you any indication this is a scam versus real?
Basically, the vast majority of them, by definition, are scams, because almost everybody by this point has signed up for the do not call list. And so if you're getting a call from a telemarketer and you're on the do not call list, you are getting a call from a scammer, somebody who flouts the law. And so just hang up on them. We do have a robocall reporting system, 844-8-NO-ROBO, or on our website, ncdoj.gov/no-robo. And people can let us know the phone number that they got the call from, what they were pitching, and any other useful information. And then we can use that to shape our enforcement priorities. But if you're getting a call from somebody and you're on the do not call list, just hang up.
Gotcha. I'm going to just jump around because it's kind of random the way my crazy mind works. But the opioid stuff, again, you mentioned the fact that opioids have really been lost from the media and our attention, which was such a critical focus. To a lesser extent, I'm going to come back to a second topic, which is school shootings. Same thing. And curious, we all worked on the STOP Act, HOPE Act. What are the next things you would like to see to advance, or is there anything needed to control the opioid issue? Because I don't think it's gone away. It's just in the background.
It has not gone away. I mean, there are tens of thousands of North Carolinians struggling with opioid addiction, and their lives are controlled by the chemical necessity to get the morphine molecule in their body, and they will do whatever it takes to get that molecule, and it becomes an all-consuming compulsion. There are things. I mean, one reason I'm trying to reach this $25 billion deal with the major companies is to have a consistent stream of funding for treatment and abatement for years to come, because there is no getting out of this one quickly. This is an absolutely insidious addiction, an insidious disease.
Do you see the drug manufacturers being part of that revenue stream to support that program?
Yeah, yes. I've sued Purdue Pharma. They're in bankruptcy. We're fighting over their assets now. I sued Insys Therapeutics. They're in bankruptcy. We sued Mallinckrodt, got $1.8 billion settlement from them. They're a generic manufacturer. And right now in negotiations with Johnson & Johnson, another generic manufacturer, but also the three major distributors, Cardinal, McKesson, and AmerisourceBergen. And so I'm hopeful that we'll get the money. What the state can do, I mentioned this in my remarks, is expand Medicaid. I mean, it's an absolute travesty. It would help people with addiction get health care. It would help other people with health conditions, mental health challenges, get health care. It would reduce our insurance rates, because you and I have higher insurance rates today because of all the uncompensated care that hits our hospital systems. It would strengthen rural hospitals. It would create tens of thousands of healthcare jobs. And it wouldn't cost the taxpayer anything, because there are ways where the state's 10% share could actually come out of the hospital system. They are so desperate for us to do this that they're willing to make a surcharge to offset the state's share for Medicaid. So that's.
I don't really want to go down the Medicaid expansion long, but has there been thought? Because one of my personal directions, and it's kind of a hybrid of what Arkansas and Kentucky did, was to approach the feds and take the 90% Fed dollars, do it in a block grant. There's been discussions with some of the payers like Blue Cross, and actually set up a commercial plan that's funded out of that. So the state never has a concern or an issue of being obligated, even indirectly or down the road, for that 10% obligation, and still be able to provide a commercial plan for that population gap.
Yeah, I mean, there are many creative potential solutions, and Mandy Cohen, the Department of Health and Human Services Secretary, has been reaching out with Donnie Lambeth in the House and others. And unfortunately, Jeff, it's our former colleagues in the Senate that remain the roadblock. And
Well,
to me, that's the no-brainer, simplest thing we can do to help solve health problems.
So then, kind of moving on the fraud topic, how much percent of work or focus is in the fraud area in your department?
You know, fraud is challenging. We have more success at getting financial relief for people who have been taken advantage of by legitimate companies, companies that you can see and touch and feel. We can get them to reimburse customers that they kind of cheated. Fraud, when it's just pure criminal fraud, a lot of this is outside our national borders, and it's very hard to actually find the people who are the perpetrators. And so what we do a lot is consumer education. Every opportunity, I'm out there talking to the public. I did a WPTF interview yesterday morning talking about the latest scams. I'm going to do one on FMY in Greensboro later this afternoon. It's all about just trying to educate people so that they can protect themselves and their loved ones. Because once the money is gone and in the hand of the fraudsters, it is so difficult to ever get it back.
Yeah, I guess in the three big categories, just for people to be aware of, and if you could collaborate, this is true or not, tax fraud becomes a big area. And I guess one of the scams that was is people were able to identify how, I don't know, who was due a refund and actually were applying for that refund to be redirected before you were paid your refund. Are you familiar with that one? Was that true?
Yes, absolutely.
And then I guess obviously Medicaid, Medicare fraud is a big one that gets perpetrated. And I know we're trying to do some IT or technology related front end detections and fixes around that as well. And the last is insurance fraud that I hear about. And can you talk to what you experience in the insurance area from a fraud?
And there's just general consumer fraud. Insurance fraud is more of the responsibility of the Department of Insurance, Mike Causey. So if
Right.
somebody files a complaint with our office, we actually do have independent authority to pursue insurance fraud, but that's what they do. So if we get a complaint about it, we forward it to them, and we remain available to the Department of Insurance if they want our help on any matter. But we have them do that. Securities fraud is handled by the Secretary of State's office. So if somebody files a complaint with us about some investment scam, we'll share that immediately with Secretary Marshall.
Gotcha.
But you're right about tax fraud and Medicaid fraud. We have a whole MID division, Medicaid investigation division, that I'm trying to think exactly, like 40 or 50 people. And it's a combination of attorneys and actual investigators. And they're 3/4 paid by the feds, because Medicaid is essentially a 3-to-1 Fed state program, and so they pay for a lot of their salaries because they have a strong incentive for us to root it out as well, like Operation Root Canal.
Sure. Okay, just shifting a little bit, and from moving from the Senate, you were in the AG's office in the Consumer Protection, then moved into the Senate for a number of years, and then obviously into the AG's. What's the biggest things that were surprises or differences for you and the adjustments moving from a legislative role into the AG role?
I would say that the thing that struck me the most, that I really frankly enjoy greatly going from the Senate to the Attorney General, is by being in the executive branch instead of the legislative branch, I have more ability to set my own agenda. When you're in the legislature, Jeff, we go to committee. It's up to the committee chair to determine what bills we're considering and voting on. So we're reactive a lot, and we have input. We try to make bills better. We have our own bills that we're pushing and pushing and pushing. But the vast majority of work that we do is in response to somebody else. Whereas as Attorney General, I was concerned about the rape kits. I went to my director of the State Crime Lab and asked how many untested kits were there, and he couldn't tell me, because he said, I've been trying to get this information from local law enforcement, and only a fraction of the agencies will tell me how many they have. They just ignore my entreaties because they're not obligated. So we went to the legislature and got a requirement that local law enforcement send their number to the State Crime Lab. And that was back in 2017. And when we came to the realization it was 15,000, then we're like, well, hell, we need a plan to attack this. And I've been working on it since then. And so I just like being able, I came into office seeing the opioid crisis as a problem. And so I said, this is something I'm going to really advance in North Carolina. I've seen the robocalls problem, so I'm going to assume a national leadership role on this. My kids, I have teenagers, and a number of their friends are addicted to Juul, this electronic cigarette nicotine device. And it just upset me so much. And all of the gains in public health we've had in reducing teen smoking, they're gone. They're all gone. More people now smoke than they did before 1998. It's an absolute travesty. And so I said, this is outrageous. I looked at Juul's advertising. They targeted young people. And so I was the first Attorney General in the country to sue Juul. And so I just get to decide what I think is important, and I go do it. And I love that.
Well, think along that line, what are the things that are top of mind for you for the next 6 months? And if you're given another 4 years, what do you see your top priorities going forward will be?
Well, definitely 6 months is doing whatever we can to help North Carolina recover and squash this pandemic, because it's literally killing people, and it's killing jobs, and it's devastating. And we're not going to get the economy going again until we have substantially reduced transmission rates. I mean, all you have to do is look at Florida, Texas, and Arizona to know that just opening things up is going to be devastating for the long-term health of the economy, because it will immediately shut back down, and we can't have that. So we helped the governor with his executive orders. We're in court defending those executive orders. We've had great success doing so, working on trying to help people with their economic hardships, like I mentioned earlier. But the other work, the opioid crisis, that's not going away, so I'm going to stay on top of it. I'm going to bird dog the sexual assault kits until every last one has been tested. I would say longer term issues same thing with robocalls. We want to keep making progress on reducing those. I'm very concerned about the power of big tech, and that's only been amplified during this crisis. You know, Amazon and Apple and Google and Facebook, they just gotten
Microsoft.
even more powerful. And so I'm part of some antitrust investigations into a couple of those companies, and that's a long-term, really meaty, very complicated issue I'm going to focus on second term.
Gotcha. The last couple things, I know those are priorities. I'm flipping it a little bit. What do you want your legacy to be?
That people's lives were better and freer from scams, from pollution, from crime, from addiction. Everything I'm trying to do is to increase people's sense of personal freedom, liberty, and enjoyment. And that's what if I can add marginally in that regard, that would be an incredible legacy.
Well, and one thing, and would appreciate your perspective on this. I obviously have an opinion, but obviously, given how difficult it has been and become to work across the aisle, whether that will be legislatively or different departments, we are pretty different ideologically, as you know. Probably here's an interesting trivia fact. An award that you won, I think in 2009, which would be very logical. You were the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association Legislator of the Year. A few years later was an exact award that I was given. So that gets us a little closer, ironically. But I think it's so important that we can have pragmatic, respectful dialogue. Any thoughts or insight to that?
I agree 100%. If there were 110%, I would agree with that. If there were 1,000%, I would agree with that. But 100%, I agree. What I try to do in these crazy partisan times is find issues of agreement. So opioids, the opioid does not ask the victim, are you a Democrat or Republican? It just gets into their bloodstream, changes their brain chemistry, and takes over. And so working with our former colleague, Jim Davis, working with our former colleague, Tom McGinnis, these are, for those of you who don't know, Republicans. Yeah, in the Senate. They were my chief allies on major legislation, the STOP Act, the Synthetic Opioid Control Act, the HOPE Act, that we got through in a bipartisan fashion. Protecting children from sex abuse. Kids, they're not Democrats or Republicans, they're just children. And knowing that everyone knows that the most important thing we can do is keep kids safe. I partnered with Jay Chowdhury, a Democrat, and Danny Britt, a Republican, on the Safe Child Act. And we passed laws to dramatically strengthen the legal protections for children. Now, any adult who is aware of a child being abused has a legal obligation to report that to law enforcement. It will shock everyone on this Zoom to know that wasn't the case before. You could actually know that your neighbor was molesting children and do nothing about it and not have any legal responsibility. That's not the case anymore. So things like child sex abuse, the rape kit issue, again, victims are Democratic and Republican. So I just try to find those issues. And same thing nationally. I'm in so many bipartisan coalitions. The big tech stuff has been bipartisan. The opioid stuff is bipartisan. And that's what I try to focus on. I know there are going to be partisan issues that arise, and I'm going to do what I think is right. And it's not because Democrats may be doing it or Republicans are against it. I'm going to do it because I think is right. But I'm also going to really work hard to find those issues of accord so that we can advance them.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. North Carolina is really blessed to have somebody of your abilities and concern and care for everybody legitimately. I'm proud to call you my friend without a question. I look forward to continuing to work together, look forward to the service that you're going to provide to our communities throughout the state. Any last thoughts or something you would like to leave us with before we let you run on to your busy schedule?
Well, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me on this morning and everybody for joining us. For the challenges we face, which are so real, it takes all of us. It takes all of us. It takes policymakers. it takes local community leaders, it takes business leaders, it takes community leaders like you all. And so I think that working together, we're going to make things a lot better for people. We have so much that we have to get done. We all know the challenges we face. And I think to the extent we can set aside our party labels and take those D and R and unaffiliated hats off and just start rolling up our sleeves and working together, it will serve us all well.
All right. Well, we appreciate you giving us this time. I know you're tremendously busy. We heard all the things that you're in the middle of, and wish you well and have a great weekend, Josh. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate everybody's time.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Jeff, we want to thank you for facilitating today's event. We want to thank everybody for joining. Those of you who might have joined halfway in, again, this was recorded. We will have it up on the Chamber social media sites, Facebook, Twitter. We will also get it out on our websites. But Jeff, really appreciate it. I think we have a very interesting Focus Friday coming up next month. You want to tell people who we have?
Sure. We'll have House Speaker and Representative Tim Moore, who is the second ranking elected official in the state of North Carolina. Runs the House and working with Senator Phil Berger, but Tim has agreed to join us, and he will give us kind of a state of the General Assembly and the things they've been working on through this short session, and hopefully give us a little insight to what will happen when they go back in session in January.
Well, we're really looking forward to that program. We also have some great events coming up. I encourage everybody to go to lakenormanchamber.org. We are getting back into the networking business, and we have scheduled a networking event for the fourth Thursday of this month. It's going to be at Boatyard, and very excited about that. Women's networking event coming back. So again, looking forward to the events. Please go to lakenormanchamber.org. Thank you, Jeff, for putting together today's program. And I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend at the lake. Thank you, everybody.